Belfast is a city of stories, and particularly at the end of the 1960s, it went through an incredible, tumultuous phase in its history. Very dramatic, sometimes very violent, and I and my family were part of that. And it was always, for me, a story of our time in that city that would come to the surface when thinking about writing something about Ireland, that period in Belfast. There was always a story about the point in anybody's life, male or female, where there is a sort of crossover into the world of adulthood, where innocence is lost and where new responsibilities, sometimes new worries, are found. And that moment, capturing that moment of crossover, which is, in this case, in Belfast in 1969, was slightly accelerated by the events around us all. A very recognizable, intimate, small family group in a threatened, stressful situation, with some big life choices. And you know, not epic in the grand sense of some sort of historical, biopic, but in the lives of the people involved, enormous decisions, titanic, decisions for the families, and people recognized that, I think. There was some sort of connection to the basic sort of family dynamics that were at play, but there was an immense sense of gratitude that we could tell any kind of story. The story is told through the eyes of a 9-10-year-old boy, and this is a 9-10-year-old boy who already was watching a lot of television and a lot of films and starting to filter experience through other imaginative encounters with stories. And one of the things that we explore is the idea of how many Westerns were to be seen on the television back then, and how much of a Western town Belfast could seem. When I wrote the script, I actually did feel I was writing a Western, and one that was sort of constructed in the mind of the 10-year-old Buddy. I've been very pleased that lots of people who are in it and people who've seen it since we've been working on it have talked about a sense of authenticity in the way people talk. So I think that center of it, I think, is something that is very literal and accurate. The language of the time, the way people behaved in terms of their leisure time, the extended family sing-songs, people out in the parks, the sense that the whole sort of street sort of played and worked together. There are good and bad things about that. Sometimes people knew way too much about, what was going on to be comfortable at all times. But if it takes a village to raise a child, this was a great sort of advert for it. So that side of it is all accurate. Jude Hill, does an excellent job in the film, and who we seem to find at a moment where his talent was ready to both blossom at the same time as Jude himself was in the best possible way ordinarily enjoying himself as a 10-year-old boy. So football for him in the film and on the streets was as important and enjoyable as making the movie. We wanted that. We didn't want somebody who was suddenly decided they were a big movie star. But at the same time, he was very serious, very prepared, very open, very flexible. Somehow you need this curious combination. Could you just be yourself, and also could you make all these tiny adjustments I'm asking you to do that might be difficult for an actor with many decades of experience? And in the process of him doing the latter, you don't want to change him from the beautiful original. As always, those who surround him, families, and in this case colleagues on the film, become critical. They're critical influences, and in this case they were so wise and compassionate, and he himself is kind of older than his years, a quality that is great for the part, and he turned out to be a real winner for us. My approach with younger actors is to treat them as if they were much older, certainly respect them entirely, and Also respect if they have some intuitive way that they might like to work. Some people respond to lots of words, some people don't. Some people like it to be a game the whole time. Some people need to be encouraged to do a bit more homework, and we probably encourage that a bit more. Jude's mum, Shawneen, was very, very good at preparing him with lines, and we made it very clear how vital it was to know the lines very well, quite a long way ahead of the day you might do them, because the dates might change. You might suddenly be doing it tomorrow, and if your effort in the morning is just about remembering the lines, you're not going to be as good as if you knew them, had forgotten them, and now could just be with them. And he seemed to understand that. Well, we wanted a level of authenticity. So Jamie Dornan is a real Belfast boy. He's just outside Belfast in Holywood, County Down, and Kieran Hines, who plays Pop, was brought up a mile from where I lived, so we practically could have shouted at each other from house to house. Katrina Balfe from the south of Ireland, but has a great understanding of the sort of vernacular Irish extended family life. And then Judi Dench, who has a lot of Irish blood in her, is the thoroughbred who can sort of do anything and attracts many actors because they so want to work with her. With Jude, with Jamie, with Kieran, we had such a deep level of authenticity and understanding that any gaps that Judi needed plugged in, that they could provide with their knowledge and their ability to understand certain kinds of situations. But Judi is so meticulous in her research that she brought that anyway. And then we had a chance, we've worked with many people over the years from Northern Ireland, from Belfast, so we got a chance to work with people we had sometimes, we're now so old that we'd given prizes to various people who ended up in the, as younger actors who ended up in the film a little bit older. It just needed particularly to sound Irish, but we also needed people who could do that and be very clear as well, because sometimes the Northern Irish accent can be something that a larger world takes a moment to catch on to, and we didn't want to have that time delay, so you needed authenticity and clarity, and this group of actors gave it, plus a sort of sense of energy, real sort of front-footed energy that I liked. There was an outgoing quality that meant they became a family very quickly. Jude Hill and Lewis McCaskey, who played Will, his older brother, they got to be very sort of filial and fraternal immediately. So did Lara McDonnell, who plays Moira, this sort of cousin. And that, frankly, one of the elements of lockdown, which was the bubble in which people had to live, was very good for engendering a sense of family, which was so key to what we were after, and this film benefited from it. We knew that we wouldn't quite find the real place in Belfast because it's 50 years on and not in the UK, so it was the gift was to be able to build it with real specificity, size of houses, size of rooms, you know, the width of the street, and then to be able to shoot it every which way. If you're on location in a real place, you have to buy the place out. There are endless logistical problems that can happen. When you build something, you just get a sense of freedom, you get a sense of control. You can create, you can paint pictures in a different way. So it doesn't have to be that big, because the world of visual effects can allow you to expand it a bit if you have the money and the budget. And so I was able to do something that was both built on specific reference of what that specific street looked like, and also how Buddy saw it. When I first went back to the street I was brought up in Belfast, I said, but this is a street for very small people. Forgetting that when I'd lived in it, I was a very small person, so it had seemed enormous to me. So I didn't have to make it quite literal, but everything imaginative that struck the eyes and ears of a 10-year-old is in that set. That's what Jim Clay helped build, and it allowed us to be tremendously flexible in the shooting. If it's curious about black and white, when we see pictures, when we see a sort of Cartier-Bresson picture, you know, a black and white still, somehow it sort of bespeaks additional authenticity, additional reality, and yet it is not the way we personally see the world, which would be more sort of encyclopedic color. It's a curious paradox that you get a grittier and more realistic effect from a poetic treatment. And so This was something that I knew I wanted to be part of the sort of mythology of this story. And it's different. There's a Hollywood black and white, and there's what I would call a sort of European black and white. And the European black and white, on the whole, it has a more sort of sometimes emaciated quality. It has its own sort of particular beauties. But it was the Hollywood black and white that kind of branded itself on my imagination. Well, speed, we were working, inevitably it just doesn't matter what the situation is, there's never enough time and there's never enough money to sort of meet what your imagination suddenly thinks is required. It's not like you want to be profligate, but sometimes that's just how it seems. So rapport, shorthand with people you've worked with before, an understanding of, visual sensibilities, the way you like to frame things. I particularly have developed by now a sort of fairly clear sense of how I like to frame things. Hopefully not the same every time, but it's quite a strong taste sometimes. Thank God it is shared and indeed developed and enhanced by Harris Zambalukos. I've been very lucky with my photographic collaborators over the years. And Jim Clay, so you give him an idea and he runs with it, they come back knowing that they have a degree of freedom that is clear based on previous experience. They know what they can run with and what they perhaps need to run by me. They know I'm pretty good at decisions and relatively clear about what I want. The film is really about that. It's about an understanding. And it isn't a complete understanding. It's merely a sort of, in the current state of knowledge, and the knowledge is not just intellectual, it's knowledge of the heart, of who you are and where you came from and how those things add up, and that an acknowledgement of it can be very powerful. Certainly not just for yourself, because if it's only for yourself, really write something down or have a have a good think about it. But if you believe that there could be something that is powerfully recognizable to other people, then it may be worth sharing that story. And in this case, I thought it was. So inevitably, you go through a very sort of full experience of it, which is often, yes, one of the things I think I've learned to do on this is be very happy about being emotional and, crying a great deal of the time. But often it's to do with recognition and on a profound level, gratitude. I think it is sometimes presumptuous to sort of hope that audiences will take anything particular away. I hope they'll be entertained. I think there's a spirit, in Belfast there's a spirit and a vitality in the place itself that I hope is reflected in this film. And I think it's a spirit and a vitality and a humor which I think is very life-affirming. And I hope that people feel that the joy and sometimes the sorrows of what happens in that city, and in this particular case in the life of this family in this street, are something that they can recognize and perhaps sympathize with, be compassionate about, and to some extent, be consoled when it comes to some of the difficult decisions in their own lives, perhaps to see, in that famous phrase, we read to know that we are not alone. In stories like this, maybe we understand that we are not alone when we look at these reflections of other lives. And if that was the case, I'd be thrilled.